Well, welcome into our very first ever Tailscale Fall update. I am joined today by Jay Stapleton and Kabir. Hi, chaps. How are you?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Now, Jay is one of our solutions engineers here at Tailscale. Why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself, Jay?
I'm one of our solutions engineers here at Tailscale. I work a lot with our customers who are just starting to use Tailscale and migrate from legacy products, and I help them do that smoothly, work with best practices, and make sure that they're able to use all of our various features that we've been introducing.
How about you, Kabir?
Yeah, I'm a product manager here at Tailscale. Been here for a few years now. I primarily focus on some of the network engineering, data plane engineering focused features, a new product area that we're excited to talk a little bit about later this week, as well as having touched some of the stuff on the client side as well.
Now, this week is an incredibly exciting week here at Tailscale. We're going to give you a sneak peek into a plethora of updates that are going to be dropping in this episode. These updates are going to be dropping throughout the week. So make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel because there's going to be a ton of YouTube videos. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, there'll be a link in the description down below. Keep an eye at tailscale.com/blog, on our subreddit, on our social media. We're going to be everywhere this week. Now, if you want to keep track of what's going on, you can follow the hashtag Tailscale Fall Update. And the general idea is it's going to be 5 days of just non-stop feature releases. First of all, on Monday the 27th, I'm going to be doing a Tailscale talk with Avery Pennerun and David Carney, two of our co-founders, over on Discord. There'll be a link to that in the description down below, but discord.gg/Tailscale is where you can go to find more information about that. On Tuesday, we've got a very exciting Embargo'd feature, which I'm not going to mention. I won't spoil the name of it, Kabir, because I know you want to keep this hush-hush until Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we've got peer relays coming. We're going to celebrate the release of our visual policy editor for our ACLs and grants rules, multiple tailnets. I know some of you are going to be very excited about that one. That's coming on Wednesday. Thursday, we're going to look at things like platform stuff, so like tsidp, workload identities, and serve and grant headers type stuff. Now, if none of that means anything to you, don't worry. This video is going to be a quick introduction to all of those things. Should we deep dive and sort of start looking into the Tailnet administration stuff? Because we want to try and make it as easy as possible for our customers to do what they want to do with their Tailnets and to customize their environments ostensibly to their needs, right? We've got a bunch of features aimed specifically at Tailnet administrators. And the first one we're going to talk about is the visual policy editor.
Yeah, and I'm going to grab that one. A lot of the feedback that I've gotten over the years working with customers is that our policy engine is really powerful, but they'd like it to be easier to use. A lot of times it's an operations team setting up Tailscale, but they'd like their service desk to be able to do the day-to-day administration. And the visual policy editor takes the JSON complexity out of the policy file and gives you a clear, intuitive interface to visualize and edit access rules. It's going to be generally available, and this means that less technical people are going to be able to change Tailscale policies without having to worry about syntax or the vagaries of the JSON interface. So almost zero learning curve to that.
This is really exciting. I think, I've been at Tailscale for 2.5 years myself. I think on day 2, somebody asked me, where is the visual, where is the UI for editing ACL rules? Mm-hmm. Well, it's now here. How do folks find it, Jay?
You can click over to the visual editor on the access controls page of the admin console.
Fantastic. So the general idea here is that anybody now can use either the text-based JSON editor or the visual policy editor, regardless of their skill level.
Right. And the visual editor actually makes changes to the JSON file, so it doesn't interfere with later moving to something like a GitOps or a Terraform integration for managing your policies.
And all of the old features that we had, like audit logging and that kind of stuff, that all still works
100%.
Through the visual policy editor? Yeah, great stuff. Now, another one that's going to be really useful for, I'm constantly switching between tailnets. I've got a demo tailnet for all of the stuff I do for YouTube. I've got my personal tailnet. I've got an MSP one that I use with a friend. Tell us how multi-tailnets is going to help with those kinds of use cases.
Yeah, one of the limitations architecturally for Tailscale early on was that a single domain with a single IDP could have a single tailnet. And sometimes we have customers who want to be able to air gap various parts of their infrastructure. And the multiple tailnets allow us to spin up multiple tailnets. It's a very clever name, using the same domain and the same identity provider. So you'll be able to have discrete environments, really useful, especially for people who manage devices in other people's infrastructure, to make sure that those are kept fully air gapped. And being able to coordinate all of this through the API and automate a lot of it going forward means that you can spin up entire API-driven tailnets for a specific purpose and tear them down when you're done with them.
Very interesting. So the tailnets exist. They're both tied to your identity, but they're two functionally separate environments, right?
Exactly. And what it looks like if you're logging in interactively is you log in as normal and you'll get a list of the tailnets that you're a member of, and you can select from that list to which one you want to join at that moment.
Fantastic. That's another one that I've been waiting for since day 2 for me. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some more secure connectivity stuff. And this one we're going to have to tread carefully because of the embargo. Hey, Kabir?
Yeah, definitely very excited about this one. As we talked about a little bit earlier, we have an exciting feature, new product area coming out. This is going to address a lot of things that I've personally been hearing about since I've joined Tailscale, and I've heard about in other contexts as well. A lot of the problems that customers are bringing to us are around the ability to tie in custom magic DNS names to specific resources on their network that they think of logically. Some of those resources might be in multiple places. They might come up and down very frequently. They might not be able to install Tailscale directly on those resources. We've also heard a lot of connectivity related issues in this area as well. So in many cases, bringing something up that just should be a really quick, easy internal application that you want to expose to some of your friends, some of your family, employees within your organization don't necessarily need large, complex NLBs or ELBs or firewalls. You don't necessarily want to put them on the public internet. And even when you do, you might want to run those in some sort of a test capacity before you do that. A lot of what we're going to talk about later this week is going to be about addressing some of those challenges and setting a foundation to address even more of those challenges in the future. So we think what we're going to talk about later this week is really just the first step of where we're going here. A lot of what we want to get out of this is input from our customers, from people who have turned away from Tailscale as a result of some of this, or people who have been considering Tailscale over the years and maybe haven't been able to sink their teeth in, really. There's a lot of places in terms of where Tailscale can integrate with other systems, with systems that you already use, and replace systems that you might not want to use because they're a bit too heavyweight and difficult to configure. That's a lot of what we'll be talking about just in a few days.
Now, in my perspective, without giving too much away, it kind of takes the kind of secure model at Tailscale, secure by default model that Tailscale is known for, and extends it down to sort of it treats things like a service level as opposed to nodes, right?
Yeah, we're taking that like full mesh mode and we're making it even more granular, really. And so
now, if you're familiar with the YouTube channel, I do this all the time with sidecar proxy containers and that kind of stuff. So if you're into that kind of service level stuff, keep an eye out. I think that one comes out on Tuesday, and that's honestly one of the updates I'm more excited for this week, and I'm pretty excited for several of the other updates. All right, now let's focus a little bit on end user experience for a second. Essentially, we just want to make it easier for people to use Tailscale.
Yeah, and as seamlessly as possible. One of the features that a few of our insiders and alpha testers have been helping us build out over the last several months has been around improving connectivity. And for those of you who are familiar with how Tailscale works under the hood, we have direct connections and relayed connections. relayed connections are incredibly reliable, but not as performant as having your two machines speaking directly to each other. Direct connections make up well over 90% of all Tailscale connections, but there are certain network configurations which make those very difficult, including some very popular features from cloud vendors. So a new feature, which is going to be built into the agent, is called a peer relay. So you can have a single node that you control be able to relay connections for other machines on your Tailnet without having to go through our series of DERP relay servers. So it avoids some of the shortcomings of using the DERP relays, such as the fact that it's a shared service and we have QoS involved, and it lets you control how your machines are networking. And the performance increases are astronomical. So if you've got things in a private subnet behind a managed NAT gateway, a 10x speed increase is very easily obtainable. And in some of our lab conditions, we've seen orders of magnitude faster.
I think it's not just about performance, though. This is going to increase reliability significantly for a lot of our customers. Mm-hmm. You could have a peer relay node that is sat out on the public internet just for you to use, as opposed to the DERP server, which, as Jay mentioned, is a free and shared resource that Tailscale provides for all customers across paid and free plans as well. Peer relays coming to all plans, I believe.
Yes, peer relays will be available really as a connectivity feature that's foundational to pretty much every Tailnet. You've heard us talk, if you've been listening to the blog or watching the blog for the past few weeks, a lot about connectivity, NAT traversal, some of the work that we've been doing in there and where we think the future is in that area. One big thing I'm excited about after some of the initial testing with our insiders and early alpha partners is that this peer relay feature is going to open up a lot of full mesh capability in places where there previously were firewall restrictions, compliance concerns, cost concerns, or security concerns with opening up many Tailscale nodes in a private subnet in mesh mode. And so peer relays in those capacities have eliminated the need for our customers to use subnet routers there. Instead, they just relay through one or two well-known endpoints, specifically only for devices on their Tailnet. And they can remove a lot of the complexity of getting to mesh mode in those kind of locked down private networks.
It's fascinating, really. I mean, my lens at looking at Tailscale, for the most part, certainly on this channel at least, is home lab users, free personal users, that kind of thing. But of course, you two both focus a lot more on our ever-growing customer base. And this feature is a direct result of customers just asking for this feature.
Yeah. Exactly. And we had a couple excellent design partners along the way across almost every customer segment of ours.
Now, I was playing around in the admin console the other day, and I found in the experimental features area a brand new toggle. I can now turn on a windowed client desktop mode for my Tailscale client on my Mac.
Yeah, this one is one of the many exciting features that we'll be talking about this week. Internally at Tailscale, we've been running this on almost every Mac device across the Tailnet. But if you head into your experimental features area and you enable the new windowed desktop experience, what you'll get is Tailscale no longer just sits in your little menu bar up on the top right corner of your screen. You also get a full windowed experience. That windowed experience gives us a lot more room to expand Tailscale's capabilities, and it comes from a lot of feedback that we've been getting over the years from our customers. This will help us build out some of our debugging features that customers want. What's happening on my network? Why can't I connect to X? Why is my connection to Y so slow? It also gives us the capability to give you more details around the devices on your network, and possibly even in the future, some of your exit nodes and other services or resources that exist on the network. So it's a really great starting point for us to be able to build a lot more smooth workflows from customer requests that we've been getting.
And for those of us weirdos who use Linux on the desktop, the deep geeks among us.
Hey, we don't judge.
Yeah. This isn't part of the big launch that's coming out, but recently one of our engineers did release a GUI client for Linux as well. Sits in the system tray or notification area, depending on your window manager. And it gives you much of the same functionality that we'd had on other platforms since day one. So it's a handy little toy for people like me.
Now, as a recovering Linux desktop user myself, I can relate strongly with the weirdos comment. But I was listening to Avery, who's our CEO, speak the other day about his vision for Tailscale as a platform and where the company's moving over the next sort of couple of years, 2 to 5 year vision type stuff. We've got a bunch of things coming this week specifically aimed at moving that story forward for sort of Tailscale as a platform.
Yeah, and I can speak a little bit to that. I mean, if you look at Tailscale, it is one of the best connectivity tools. For the past few years, it has been. It's really easy to use. It just works. One of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of that can be extensible, right? And some of the things we're going to be talking about later this week are about building in that extensibility. So Tailscale at its core has identity, and we want to try to bring that identity to other resources on your network. Maybe, Alex, we can talk a little bit about tsidp as one of the things.
What better place to start with identity than a literal identity server?
Exactly.
tsidp, Tailscale Identity Provider, is a project that's been lurking around in the Tailscale source code for 2 or 3 years at this point. But in the last few weeks, our strategic projects team have broken it out into its own separate Git repo. We'll put a link to that in the description, of course, down below. But essentially, you can use this as an OAuth OIDC provider that plugs into and natively speaks Tailscale. There's been a bunch of big updates to it. We've added a UI, for example. We've made a lot of the workflows around tsidp much easier as well. And essentially, it brings native identity management capabilities into the Tailscale ecosystem, into the platform. And really, the idea is to make it the simplest and easiest way to authenticate services running on your Tailnet, backed by the identity that you've already got through being on your Tailnet. And we see this as a really important building block as part of that future strategy.
I think the other side of the equation when it comes to identity is about identities that don't necessarily originate in Tailscale. And we've been really good about integrating with those identities if they're for users. But what we haven't done a great job of until this week is integrating with external identities for devices or resources or services, something more granular that isn't really a user. And so later this week, we'll be talking about workload identity. And what that allows our customers to do is authenticate their services as really themselves. And so it gives you a workload identity that can then be used in your access controls for fine-grained ACLs, policies, better auditability, integration, especially if you're doing things like CI/CD automation or connectivity over Tailscale. That's kind of a really big use case that we've been seeing. So maybe every branch or repo might have its own job, and we can use some of those external identities on Tailscale and then integrate them right into your policy.
And that plugs perfectly into the embargoed subject that we were talking about earlier on in the episode, which I wish we could talk about. It'd be way easier if we could, but hey, embargoes are embargoes. I think for me, it's really exciting to see how some of these pieces of the jigsaw are starting to fit together. Just in this short call that we're having here, talking about all these different feature releases, they are cross-functional in purpose, but also in strategic vision as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe we should plug one more item on the platform story a bit, and then we should talk about how all this came together, because I think that's an important part of the story too. One thing that we've heard a lot about is if you've used our grant app capabilities feature, or you've used Tailscale identities, if you've used serve or TSNet, there's a bunch of ways that you can grab some of those capabilities and make your applications aware of them. We are bringing that to serve as well, which is a CLI that can be used to expose resources either on your device or maybe on the local network to the Tailnet. So those app capabilities become a lot more powerful in the sense that perhaps you want to give Alex read access to the database and give Jay write access to the database. You can make a proxy that very easily reads those in and says, hey, if it's Alex connecting, give him read, and if it's Jay, give him write. That's something you can write right into your application logic.
Because every Tailscale request that gets routed over the network has had these headers in for a while. What's new about these new headers, I guess?
Yeah, we're bringing in capabilities, which is a part of our grants policy framework, and those capabilities are completely customizable. These headers will now include those capabilities, and you can use that alongside the user identities that we're already passing over. The other interesting component of this is that it's not just any capabilities. You, as the developer that is sharing some sort of a resource, you get to choose which capabilities you actually care about, and so we'll filter out the rest. So you can say, hey, this database proxy cares about read-write, or maybe it cares about which table this user should have access to. And maybe my web application cares a little bit more about authorization for specific components of that application. We're making Tailscale more of a platform, really.
I'm just sat over here thinking about a former job I had in a financial institution in London, thinking how useful some of this stuff would have been when I was messing around with OpenShift and Kubernetes back in the day specifically. You guys are so lucky to have Tailscale in your lives these days. All right, so that brings us to the end of all of the new features that are going to be announced. But I do want to draw your attention to the fact that all of this stuff is going to be announced in full detail throughout the week. There'll be YouTube videos, there'll be blog posts, social media posts. There's a webinar coming up on October the 30th, which I'll be hosting, I think, with you, Jay, or certainly anyway, there's a webinar on October the 30th where we'll walk through everything in full detail. Mm-hmm. On top of that is the Tailscale Talk, Meet the Founders, effectively, on October the 27th with Avery Pennerun and David Carney. That'll be over on Discord at discord.gg/Tailscale. Now, an event like this, a sort of a campaign, a week like this, doesn't just happen. It's a huge cross-team collaboration.
Yeah. And I think this is a good time to shout out a lot of the teams that came together to make this happen. As you've heard us talk about throughout this past 30 minutes, some of these are problems that we've been hearing about for years. Some of these are problems that we've been getting feedback on iteratively from many customers. So it's not just the internal team, it's all of you. It's also our teams that have been able to collate some of that feedback and put a lot of thought and effort and care into it over the years across engineering, across our community, across our support teams. It's also bringing all of that new feature sets into our documentation so it's easy to understand, it's easy to consume. It's about getting our marketing teams to get the word out so you know what these features are, where to find them, when they're available, if they apply to you, and our sales teams as well in making sure that they can understand the message and folks like Jay can actually implement them for our customers of every size. So it's really, really big team effort, as well as folks on user research, design, make sure it just works and it feels right when you get to hold it.
It's kind of funny that these are all landing all at once because we've been doing a summer of rebuild internally, like addressing a lot of technical debt. And so on the outside, it might not appear like much has been happening at Tailscale. But let me assure you from the inside, the engineering meetings I get to sit in and stuff like that, I mean, the amount of work, the amount of features that have been quietly shipping behind the scenes that users would never even notice has been astounding. It's been a collaboration across engineering, PMM, EPD, marketing, just every aspect of the company has been involved in some way, shape or form. So yeah, it's been a lot. It's been emotional, as they might say.
And definitely a special shout out to Alex, who has been doing a great job, especially on the video side, to help film, edit all of these features and this conversation, right? This was a great convo, I think, to have.
Yeah, we need to hear more from you, the people watching this. You can talk to us in our brand new Discord server. Have I plugged it enough yet? discord.gg/Tailscale. You can find us on all the various different social medias, and there'll be links to a lot of that stuff in the description down below. Come join one of our live events and talk to the co-founders next week and tell them what you want from Tailscale over the next 5 years. Anything else either of you wish to discuss, or should we get out of here?
I wonder if I say the name of the embargoed thing, do I get like a bleeping sound over it after you are done editing it?
I'm out. All options are possible right now.
All right. Well, take a look Tuesday, and we'll have some exciting news around a new feature that's really going to change the way
Absolutely.
that you interact with the Tailnet.
Yep, it's going to be a big week. And thank you very much for watching, everybody. I've been Alex.
And I've been Jay.
I'm Kabir.
See you next time.